Imagine opening your vegetable garden and discovering a treasure that was almost lost to time. Vegetables with flavors our grandparents knew, but which very few remember today. In this video, we're going to rescue 15 forgotten jewels. From nutty flavored roots to leaves that were a delicacy for kings and commoners alike. Stick around because you're about to discover vegetables almost lost forever, and that you can still cultivate in your own garden. 1. Black salsify. Centuries ago, at medieval banquets, there was a guest that almost no one remembers today. Black salsify, or scorzonera. At first glance, this long dark tuber might go unnoticed, but it actually held a secret. Its flavor, surprisingly similar to oysters, made it a delicacy served at both noble tables and common kitchens. It's no coincidence that it earned the nickname the vegetable oyster. Now, how was it consumed? The curious thing is that, just like the potato or carrot, salsify was boiled, roasted, or even fried, releasing a delicate aroma and a smooth taste that charmed those who tried it. Furthermore, it was a valuable source of nutrients in an era when the diet depended almost entirely on what the earth could offer. Thus, it provided not only flavor, but also energy and health. However, with the arrival of easier-to-manage crops, such as the potato, black salsify was relegated to oblivion. It slowly disappeared from gardens and kitchens, becoming a botanical rarity that very few have tasted again. Nevertheless, the most fascinating thing is that it is still possible to grow it today. It requires patience because it takes time to develop, but in return, it offers a rustic, resilient food full of history. Consequently, rescuing black salsify not only means recovering a lost flavor, but also reconnecting with a forgotten part of our culinary memory. In fact, every bite is almost a journey through time, back to those medieval hearths where the creativity of cooks transformed the humble into the extraordinary. And therein lies its magic, in the possibility of bringing back to the table a vegetable that was on the verge of disappearing, but which still beats beneath the soil, waiting to be rediscovered. 2. Cardoon. Just as black salsify hid a secret in its roots, another almost forgotten vegetable holds the heritage of tradition in its stalks, the cardoon. A close relative of the artichoke, this robust and thorny plant might seem unappetizing at first glance. However, its long, fleshy stalks hide a tender texture and a delicate flavor that is released after a very special process, blanching. Indeed, farmers would cover the cardoon with earth, or wrap it to protect it from light, thus achieving lighter, more tender, and less bitter stalks. This technique, passed down from generation to generation, turned the cardoon into a seasonal delicacy that held a privileged place on the Christmas table, especially in Spain. In fact, for centuries, it was one of the most anticipated dishes of those family celebrations, prepared in stews with almonds or accompanied by an almond and pine nut sauce. However, the cardoon gradually lost prominence. The modernization of agriculture and changes in eating habits displaced this crop, which was considered labor-intensive compared to other faster and easier-to-produce vegetables. Thus, what was once a symbol of celebration and abundance was reduced to small family gardens and the memory of those who tasted it in their childhood. Despite this, the cardoon retains its gastronomic dignity. Its digestive properties, low caloric content, and particular flavor make it a food that could win over new generations, especially in a time when the old is being rediscovered as valuable. By recovering it, we not only bring back an almost lost vegetable, but also reactivate a tradition that united field and table around celebration. 3. Spiny chayote. Just as the cardoon reminds us of the importance of family traditions, there is another vegetable that symbolizes the resilience of nature, the spiny chayote. Unlike its more common, smooth version, this ancestral variety retains a skin covered with spines which, far from being a flaw, was a form of natural defense against pests and predators. The interesting thing is that, once its intimidating appearance is overcome, the spiny chayote reveals a surprisingly tender and fresh interior. Its white, juicy pulp adapts to all kinds of preparations. It adds smoothness to stews, consistency to soups, and a refreshing touch to salads. It's no accident that for centuries it has been cultivated in mountainous and rural areas, where the diversity of vegetables ensured the subsistence of communities. However, with the arrival of easier-to-handle varieties, such as the smooth-skinned chayote, the spiny one was relegated to the background. Its rough appearance and difficulty in transport caused it to disappear from mass markets, being confined to small family farms or regions where its authenticity is still appreciated. The curious thing is that, aside from its history of oblivion, this chayote holds an added value. It is more resistant to diseases and better preserves the original flavor of the species. In times when agriculture seeks to recover biodiversity and natural resistance, the spiny chayote emerges as a hidden gem, capable of offering us not only food, but also a lesson in adaptation. In this way, like black salsify and cardoon, this fruit with a spiny armor shows that what was once common can become extraordinary again if we dare to rescue it from oblivion. 4. Aracacha. Just as the spiny chayote teaches us the lesson of resilience, another almost lost vegetable tells us about the blending of flavors in a single root, the aracacha. Native to the Andes, this plant was cultivated for centuries by pre-Columbian civilizations and still holds a special place in the traditional cuisine of Peru and Colombia today. The most curious thing about aracacha is its flavor, which is difficult to categorize. When tasted, one perceives a nuance that combines the sweetness of the carrot, the freshness of the celery, and a slight hint of chestnut. This complexity makes it a versatile root, ideal for purees, thick soups, or even bread and cakes, where its starch gives it body and smoothness. Furthermore, its value is not limited to taste. Rich in easily digestible carbohydrates, aracacha was for centuries an essential food in high-altitude communities, where the rigorous climate made it difficult to cultivate other species. Thus, more than a simple vegetable, it was an ally for survival. However, with the expansion of more profitable crops like the potato and cassava, yucca, aracacha was pushed into the background. Its slow growth and demanding soil requirements caused many farmers to abandon it, turning it into an almost invisible crop in global markets. Nevertheless, in recent years, chefs and farmers have started looking at it again. Its unique flavor, its ancestral history, and its nutritional value are slowly rescuing it from oblivion. Recovering aracacha is not just bringing back an ingredient, it is also paying homage to the agricultural wisdom of the Andean peoples, who knew how to utilize every root as a treasure from the earth. 5. Jerusalem artichoke, or sunchoke. Just as aracacha harbors a surprising mix of flavors inside, another forgotten tuber offers an equally singular profile, the Jerusalem artichoke, or sunchoke. For centuries, it was a staple food in Europe, highly prized for its sweet, nutty flavor and its ability to grow in poor, cold soils. In fact, the curious thing is that the Jerusalem artichoke was so popular that in times of scarcity, it fed thousands of families until the arrival of the potato relegated it to oblivion. Its productivity was lower, and its irregular appearance made it less attractive in markets that demanded uniformity. However, its natural resistance and digestive properties make it a perfect candidate for sustainable agriculture today. 6. Maca. After learning the history of the Jerusalem artichoke, which Europe forgot when it was seduced by the potato, we now ascend to the Andes to find a root that never lost its mystique, maca. Cultivated since Inca times in hard soils and at altitudes where few crops can survive, this plant became a true symbol of resilience and vitality. Its flavor is earthy, with a sweet undertone that is surprising in every preparation. It can be consumed fresh, dehydrated, or processed into flour, and in all its forms, it offers an energy boost that made it an almost sacred food. It's no coincidence that Inca warriors considered it part of their strategic diet before battles. The interesting thing is that, in addition to its role in nutrition, maca had a prominent cultural place. It was associated with fertility and strength, to the point of becoming a highly valuable trade product among Andean communities. Thus, more than a food, it was also a social currency and a symbol of prosperity. With the passage of time, however, its cultivation was reduced to small high Andean valleys, and the modern world took centuries to rediscover it. Today, in a context where the search for natural and nutritious foods is on the rise, maca is once again making headlines as a superfood. And although this label is recent, the truth is that its power was already known and utilized by indigenous peoples long before science tried to explain it. In short, maca is living proof that ancestral wisdom knew how to recognize the value of what sprouted from the earth. By recovering it, we not only recover a unique flavor, but also an essential part of the agricultural history of the Andes. 7. Indian mustard greens. If maca connects us with the strength of the Andean roots, Indian mustard greens lead us to the realm of leaves, those that offered greenery in winter when almost all fields were bare. For centuries, this crop was common in humble gardens, as its resistance to cold guaranteed food when other vegetables didn't survive. The particular characteristic of Indian mustard greens is its spicy nature, a nuance that awakens the palate and made it indispensable in hot stews, substantial soups, or even as a spinach substitute. In fact, in many rural areas, it was known as the battle vegetable. It grew fast, withstood frosts, and offered flavor when it was most needed. Over time, however, its presence diminished. Softer and easier to market leaves, such as lettuce or modern spinach, took its place. The mustard, more intense and less uniform, was relegated to small corners, cultivated only by those who knew and appreciated its character. Even so, its story is far from over. Today, it is regaining interest, not only because it adds an exotic and vigorous touch to cooking, but also for its nutritional properties. It is rich in vitamins, minerals, and antioxidant compounds. Moreover, its hardiness makes it an ideal ally for sustainable agriculture, where the goal is to recover varieties that require fewer inputs and maintain greater biodiversity. Thus, Indian mustard greens remind us that the strength of the garden doesn't always come from the spectacular, but from the persistent. A simple leaf with an intense flavor, capable of surviving winters and bringing back the memory of a field that knew how to feed us with what was available. 8. Okra, or gumbo. If Indian mustard showed us how simple leaves could sustain entire winters, the okra reveals the hidden power of pods. Native to Africa, and later spread to the Americas through trade and migration routes, this vegetable conquered entire kitchens due to a very peculiar characteristic. When cooked, it releases mucilage, a vegetable gel that naturally thickens stews. This detail, which some find surprising and even strange, is precisely what made it the protagonist of emblematic dishes like Louisiana gumbo, where okra provides not only texture, but also a mild flavor that combines perfectly with spices and meats. Thus, what seemed like a simple culinary resource was transformed into a cultural trait that united African and American traditions in one dish. However, beyond the kitchen, this vegetable holds other secrets. Rich in fiber and vitamins, okra was valued for centuries for its nutritional contribution and its ability to thrive in hot, dry climates. This resistance made it a guarantee of sustenance in regions where other crops failed. With the passage of time, it remained a daily food in some areas, while in others, it lost presence, seen as an exotic or difficult to prepare ingredient. However, those who have dared to rediscover it know that its versatility is enormous. Fried, pickled, sautéed, or in soups, it is always surprising. In this way, okra teaches us that the true wealth of the garden is not always in what is seen, but in what transforms dishes from within. A humble pod capable of thickening broths and, at the same time, building bridges between continents. 9. Horizontal. Just as okra transformed stews across the Atlantic in Mexico, there is a plant that played a similar role in the pre-Hispanic diet. Horizontal. A close relative of quinoa and amaranth, this vegetable was cultivated for centuries by Mesoamerican civilizations, who valued it both for its resilience and its versatility in the kitchen. The fascination of horizontal lies in its tender stalks and shoots, which are consumed in multiple ways. Fried or battered, they become a crunchy and flavorful dish. In sauces, they absorb flavors with surprising ease. And in stews, they provide a smooth texture that complements cereals and legumes. It wasn't simply a vegetable, it was a central ingredient that helped diversify the diet of entire communities. Furthermore, its importance extended beyond the palate. Huauzontle represented a strategic agricultural resource capable of growing in difficult soils and offering essential nutrients in times of scarcity. Along with quinoa and amaranth, it was part of the trio of crops that guaranteed balance and survival. With the arrival of new foods brought from Europe, its prominence gradually faded. However, in some Mexican regions, it resisted oblivion and remained in family kitchens, transmitted as an inherited secret from generation to generation. Today, rediscovering Huauzontle means reconnecting with that millennial heritage. It means savoring a piece of pre-Hispanic history in every bite and recognizing that Mexico's food biodiversity holds treasures that still beat in the fields. 10. Krosny, or Chinese artichoke. Just as the Mexican Huauzontle reminds us of the richness of the pre-Hispanic tradition, in Europe, there was a tiny tuber that also conquered palates and then vanished into oblivion. The krosny, also known as the Chinese artichoke. This curious vegetable, with its spiral shape and almost mineral jewel appearance, was one of the great treasures of 19th century French cuisine. Its fame was not unwarranted. When tasted, one discovers a delicate flavor, with nuances reminiscent of artichoke and walnut, a perfect balance between the vegetal and the earthy. In Parisian banquets, krosny was served as an exotic luxury, capable of impressing both for its rarity and its refinement on the palate. However, what was once synonymous with sophistication was eventually displaced by the logic of modern agriculture. Its small size and the difficulty of harvesting made it unprofitable, and over time, it disappeared from the markets, relegated to botanical collections and small amateur gardens. Even so, the krosny holds a special charm. It is resistant, nutritious, and its spiral appearance makes it a true visual spectacle when served on a plate. Today, some chefs are rescuing it, fascinated by its ability to bring a historical and aesthetic touch to high cuisine. In short, the krosny reminds us that the small can be extraordinary, that gastronomic memory is also made up of those minuscule details which, though almost forgotten, hold a universe of flavor. 11. Old Galician kale, or ancient Galician cabbage. Just as the croissant showed us that the tiny could shine in French haute cuisine, in Spanish popular tradition, another rustic and powerful vegetable became a star of the kitchens. The old Galician col, or Berza Galega Antigua. This vegetable, an ancestor of modern cabbages, was for centuries the inseparable companion of the stews and potages that warmed winters in Galicia. The most striking thing about this kale is its resistance. It grows in poor soils, withstands the cold with admirable dignity, and offers green, fleshy leaves when other plants have already succumbed to winter. In Galician stews, its intense, earthy flavor balanced meats and legumes, becoming an indispensable ingredient in peasant cuisine. With agricultural modernization, many of its traditional varieties were displaced by more uniform and easy-to-market cabbages. However, some farmers and rural families preserved its seeds, aware that they contained not only a food, but a fundamental part of Galician cultural identity. Today, the ancient kale survives in small gardens, almost as an act of resistance against oblivion. And the curious thing is that its potential is once again attracting interest. Chefs and gastronomes seek in it that genuine flavor that is not found in industrial versions. In this way, the old Galician kale is more than a vegetable. It is a bridge between generations, a living memory that still beats in the broths, potages, and stews that have fed Galicia for centuries. 12. Skirit. Just as the old Galician kale connects us with the stews and potages of Spanish tradition in medieval Europe, another modest root earned a place at the table: skirit. Simple in appearance, this vegetable hid a treasure inside, as its white, elongated root offered an unmistakable sweetness, reminiscent of a carrot with a slight hint of parsley. Skirit had something special: its versatility. It could be eaten raw, retaining all its freshness, but it was also boiled, fried, or pureed, adapting to the tastes and resources of each household. In a time when the diet depended almost entirely on what the earth provided, This root offered not only flavor, but also variety. For centuries, it was considered a valuable crop in European gardens, present in both monasteries and peasant plots. However, with the arrival and expansion of more productive crops, such as the potato and the modern carrot, skirret was relegated to the background until it almost completely disappeared from daily life. The curious thing is that, despite having been forgotten, those who have rediscovered it highlight its unique flavor, more complex than that of other current roots. That subtle sweetness, combined with its medieval history, makes it an ideal candidate to return to contemporary gardens, where diversity is increasingly valued. In a way, skirret is like a whisper from the past, discreet, almost invisible, but full of a richness that can still surprise us. Recovering it is to once again hear that lost voice that nourished entire generations in medieval Europe. 13. Malabar or Ceylon spinach. If skirret transports us to the cold medieval gardens of Europe, Malabar spinach, also called Ceylon spinach, takes us to the exact opposite extreme, the hot and humid climates of tropical Asia. There, where common spinach doesn't survive, this climbing plant demonstrates its strength by scaling walls and fences with fleshy, bright leaves that seem designed to resist the sun. The most curious thing about Malabar spinach is that it breaks with our traditional idea of spinach. It doesn't wilt easily, maintains a juicy texture even in midsummer, and offers a fresh flavor that makes it ideal for both salads and quick stir-fries. Its versatility made it an indispensable resource in regions where the heat decimated other leafy greens. Furthermore, its striking appearance, with reddish stems and intense green leaves, meant that in many places, it was also grown as an ornamental plant, adorning gardens. However, its true value lies in its resistance. A spinach that does not depend on cold seasons, capable of thriving where others fail. Over time, it was almost forgotten in the West, overshadowed by common spinach that dominated the market. But today, in a context where crops adaptable to climate change are being sought, Malabar spinach appears as a brilliant alternative. Nutritious, productive, and ready to withstand what the weather imposes. Thus, while skirret reminded us of Europe's medieval past, Ceylon spinach speaks of the ingenuity of tropical regions, where nature found a way to offer fresh leaves even under the most relentless sun. 14. Nasturtium. If Malabar spinach showed us how a vegetable could be both resilient and ornamental, the nasturtium reveals another facet of that duality. Beauty and flavor united in the same plant. Today, many recognize it only as a decorative flower, with its intensely colored petals that brighten balconies and gardens. However, in times past, it was much more than an adornment. The most curious thing is that its fruits were used pickled, popularly known as the poor man's capers. In times when the luxury of real capers was beyond the reach of most, nasturtium offered an ingenious and accessible alternative, once again demonstrating the culinary creativity of communities. But it wasn't just the fruits that were utilized. Its tender leaves and flowers were also consumed fresh, providing a spicy, cress-like touch that brightened salads and simple dishes. In this way, nasturtium was a condiment, a food, and a delight for the eyes all at once. With the passage of time, its gastronomic facet faded, overshadowed by its ornamental role. However, those who have dared to rediscover it know that it is much more than a pretty flower. It is a versatile vegetable, full of flavor nuances and steeped in history. Nasturtium, in short, reminds us that the border between the useful and the beautiful was never so clear in ancient gardens. There, what nourished could also adorn, and what decorated could be transformed into food. And perhaps that is its greatest legacy, teaching us that food also appeals to the eye, with colors that invite us to try unexpected flavors. 15. Ancient lacinato kale. Just as nasturtium showed us how the ornamental could also be food, the ancient lacinato kale teaches us how an almost forgotten vegetable can return with more strength than ever. This traditional variety of curly kale, originally from Italy, has long, rough, and bluish leaves that were part of Mediterranean peasant cuisine for centuries. Its resistance to cold and its ability to grow in poor soils made it an indispensable ally for farmers. However, over time, it was relegated, displaced by softer and easier-to-market vegetables. For decades, it barely survived in small traditional gardens, like a remnant of another time. The surprising thing is that, in the 21st century, this curly cabbage was reborn with a new name and a new identity: kale, the superfood par excellence. Its high content of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants catapulted it to international fame, moving from Italian villages to the most sophisticated menus and supermarkets across half the world. Beyond trends, the truth is that lacinato kale reminds us that often what we consider new is nothing more than a return to the past. What was once humble food for peasants is now celebrated as a nutritional jewel, demonstrating that the cycles of history are also reflected in the gardens. In this way, the ancient lacinato kale concludes our journey through 15 vegetables almost lost forever, but which you can still grow today. Each one holds a piece of history, a distinct flavor, and a lesson on the importance of rescuing the diversity that once fed the world.